At the edge of a dimly lit roadside, just beyond the reach of a passing car's headlights, a small body lies on its side, its posture slack and uneven, limbs loose, head angled downward, and mouth partially open, showing no visible reaction to sound or movement as the surrounding environment shifts with light flickering across the ground and vibrations from nearby traffic. Yet the body remains unchanged, and this stillness does not emerge from a lack of awareness, but appears instead as a consistent behavioral pattern, under a specific kind of pressure, where movement may increase exposure, rather than reduce it in many situations. Animals respond to threat through immediate displacement, running, climbing, diving, or scattering depending on available pathways, and speed relative to the threat. But here the individual, often a Virginia opossum, remains in place, even when an exit path appears physically possible, and this becomes more understandable when considered in terms of detection and decision timing, because in environments where threats are fast-moving and visually oriented, initiating movement at the wrong moment can increase the likelihood of being noticed, as movement creates contrast against the ground and against still objects within the predator's visual field, whereas remaining motionless removes that signal. But this is not simple stillness, as the posture itself shifts into a specific configuration, where the body becomes slack and muscle tension appears reduced, so the overall form no longer resembles an alert or responsive animal, but instead resembles something already processed and no longer relevant as a target, which matters because many predators do not respond equally to all potential targets, with some relying on movement triggers, while others assess the condition of a target before committing energy, meaning a body that appears unresponsive may fall outside the category of viable prey, especially if the predator is sensitive to risk, such as disease or uncertain return. So from this perspective, the behavior is not passive, but a repositioning within the predator's decision framework. The alternative of attempting to flee introduces a different set of constraints, because the Virginia opossum is not built for sustained speed, its movement being functional, but not optimized for rapid escape over long distances. So in open or semi-open environments, initiating flight without sufficient distance advantage can lead to pursuit, which reduces viable outcomes, and climbing is another option, but requires proximity to vertical structures and time to engage. So if the threat is already within a certain range, the transition from ground to elevation may not complete before interception. Narrowing the decision space until remaining motionless becomes one of the few strategies that does not escalate the situation, by avoiding triggering pursuit, reducing visual contrast, and changing the interpretation of the body itself. This behavior also appears to follow a threshold pattern, as it does not occur in every encounter, with lower levels of disturbance still allowing relocation. But as proximity increases and reaction time decreases, the cost of misjudging a movement-based escape rises until the shift into immobility occurs when movement no longer guarantees improvement, and once in that state, the body maintains it with consistency, so external stimuli, such as touch, sound, or changes in light, do not immediately reverse the condition, which is part of the strategy because a brief pause would not be sufficient, as predators often wait for secondary cues and sustained stillness reinforces the initial signal. Yet this state is not indefinite, as over time, if the immediate threat diminishes, subtle changes begin to appear, with muscle tone gradually returning and the body reorienting as movement resumes slowly. At first then, with increasing coordination, suggesting the behavior is tightly linked to environmental input, rather than being fixed. Another layer of constraint appears when considering energy use, since active escape behaviors consume significant energy in short bursts, and if those actions fail, the cost is immediate, whereas remaining motionless requires minimal energy once initiated, allowing persistence through a threat window, without depleting resources needed for later movement, which becomes especially relevant in environments where encounters may be frequent and resources unevenly distributed. So a strategy that preserves energy across repeated exposures increases long-term viability, and there is also a temporal dimension, because predators do not remain in one place indefinitely but operate on movement cycles, scanning and approaching before shifting focus if no clear target emerges. So by extending stillness beyond the predator's immediate attention span, the animal effectively outlasts the decision window, aligning with time, rather than attempting to escape it. While the posture itself contributes to this alignment, as the lack of rigidity, irregular positioning, and partial exposure of teeth or tongue combine into a visual pattern that does not resemble active resistance or alertness, and instead reduces clarity for the observer, where uncertainty can act as a deterrent. Not all predators will disengage and some may still investigate, especially if driven by high energy demands. So the strategy does not guarantee survival but across repeated interactions, it provides a viable alternative to strategies that consistently fail, under similar constraints, and over time. The persistence of this behavior suggests it occupies a stable position among available responses, not as a default but as a reliable option. Under specific conditions, and returning to the roadside, the body remains where it was first seen as the environment shifts slightly with light and sound, changing until gradually almost imperceptibly, the alignment begins to adjust with slight tension, returning to the limbs and the head, lifting a fraction as the stillness dissolves in stages, eventually leading the animal to move away, without visible trace of the earlier state, showing that the behavior does not persist as identity, but appears when conditions require it and recedes, once those conditions pass, leaving a consistent pattern where when movement increases risk, stillness becomes the alternative, not as absence of action, but as a different form of response, that operates by altering how the situation is interpreted, rather than by changing location, continuing to function over time, not by avoiding threats entirely, but by navigating the moments when avoidance is no longer possible.